Hello, my friends. Welcome to Friday, the 31st of January, 2025. And what a week it has been. This is Resistance Live, and I am ECM. There is some breaking news this morning that is disturbing, to say the least. Not that there's a lot in this week that hasn't been disturbing, but this one is particularly concerning. And we have to talk about it because we don't yet know the why, but we know that it is extremely high risk. So more on that in a minute. And we got a lot of other stuff to talk about too. I'm glad you're all here. For our visually challenged viewers, today I'm wearing a dark gray sweater with a light gray cardigan over top. My hair is pulled back. I am a pink skin, green eyed, dirty blonde haired woman, and I am in front of my bookshelf and my cart. And I am in my office. And I'm coming to you, as always, from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohegan land. Okay, so let's talk about this news that broke this morning. So there is a senior US Treasury official who has served through 11 presidents. He started out at the US Treasury Department as an intern decades ago. He is a man by the name of David Lebrick, and nobody knows his politics. He's never indicated whether he's a Democrat or a Republican. No indication that there's anything about him that would be in any way partisan. In fact, the reporting this morning is that no one has any clue how he votes or who he votes for or who he supports. But apparently, within the last week, he's had a clash with officials working at the behest of Elon Musk. And the clash itself is something that should deeply concern every American, because essentially what the reporting is showing is that David Lebrick is quitting because Elon Musk wants access to an incredibly sensitive, secured platform inside the US Treasury, for which only a handful of the most senior US Treasury officials have access. And what does that platform do? It is responsible for dispersing $1 trillion a year in Social Security benefits, tax refunds, Medicaid, and government contracts. Just going to give you all a minute to pause and take that in. Because when I read this, I thought to myself, holy crap. And apparently, it gets worse. Elon Musk and his people have been trying to get access to this platform since after the election, when Joe Biden was still in office. They have been pushing so hard for this that they have run up against conflict with David Lebrick and others. And now, after this most recent kerfuffle where David Lebrick did not want to give Elon Musk and his people access to this information, access to this platform, access to this money, he's out. So this raises some very significant questions, because it's one thing to take a position in an advisory board, because we all know that DOGE is not an official government agency. If you've been watching here for some time, you know this to be true. It's one thing to be thinking about things like, let's see how we can cut government spending through the budget. Quite another thing entirely to get access to the electronic means of conveying money to US citizens to which they are entitled. And I personally have very big questions this morning, because I'm wondering why it is that Elon Musk's people would want access to the means to pay people their Social Security benefits. Why would Elon Musk and his people want access to the platform that is responsible for paying tax refunds? Why would they want that? And I'm just going to tell you speculation, but it seems to me there's only two reasons why they would want it. One would be to not send it out and keep it for themselves, or reallocate it to something else, maybe pay for more tax cuts to the uber rich. The other would be to absolutely crush needy and poor people in this country and average everyday Americans who are counting on a tax refund. And some of the government contractors that, generally speaking, have been working with the US government for a long time, but maybe happen to have a DEI program. So whatever it is that is at issue here is really not great. And I'm sure with coming reporting, we're going to learn a little bit more about what this is about. But the thing that should worry everyone is that if David Lebrick, as a senior Treasury Department official who has served under 11 presidents, and for all intents and purposes, as far as we know, is perhaps one of the most nonpartisan people in the entire federal government, is out, thanks to what Musk and his people have been doing, what happens next? Does that mean that Elon Musk, who nobody elected, who is not a government official, who is, running around Washington acting like he's in charge of the entire federal government when he's not, Is he now inside that sensitive secured platform that is responsible for $1 trillion in taxpayer money? If so, what's he planning on doing with it? So, you all know I try to come on here and not fearmonger, and I'm not trying to do that today. But I do think this is something that raises really big alarm bells. And I'm going to add to this something that is floating around in the reporting now as well that raises additional questions about authority. So apparently, get this, the EO and the OMB memo that went with it that froze all the Medicaid platforms, they then tried to walk this back and claim that, this was a glitch, that froze access from states to Medicaid, to funding for programs for veterans, to Head Start money, to free lunch money. The memo that went along with that EO apparently went out without any approval from the White House. Also, that email that went out, there is some reporting on this in the last 24 hours to federal workers, more on this in a minute, saying fire yourselves. We'll give you 8 months without any actual allocated funding or any actual promise of a pension or anything else. That email also apparently went out without any oversight from the White House. Now, I'm not going to say Donald Trump didn't know about this or that people inside his White House don't think this is entirely in line with their agenda. But the fact that the OMB, which as we know from reporting this week is currently being staffed by high school graduates and people who used to work for Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, if they're sending out emails that impact the employment of 2 million federal employees without the stamp of approval from the White House, we have a very serious problem. And that's beyond the fact that we elected, a mentally deficient fascist. We being, a broad term there, certainly not I and not any of you. So one of the things that I think is really in the specter of consideration right now is who is actually in charge? Who is actually running the federal government right now? Who's running it? And I think that these questions are questions that are going to need to be answered sooner rather than later. Because frankly, notwithstanding Trump's performance yesterday at that press conference that we spent yesterday's broadcast talking about, it really looks like Trump's not in charge of much. And the idea that the richest man in the world is now apparently trying to take over our entire federal government outside the scope of any election, outside the scope of any designated authority, should really worry everyone. So that brings me back to the email that went out to all the federal employees, because there's a new development. So you all will remember that a couple of days ago, an email went out to all 2 million federal employees saying you can have 8 months leave if you fire yourself, when really there was no money. It was basically work from home for the next 8 months if you want, and then go. We talked about that 2 days ago in the broadcast entitled "They Think We're Stupid." One of the things that I want you all to remember here is that that email didn't sound like it was actually written from any official government source. Okay, it went out from the OMB, but it was really not worded like anything you would expect to see from the federal government. In fact, it looked kind of like a cut and paste job from when Elon Musk just absolutely gutted and purged everyone from Twitter. The suspicion is that's exactly where it came from. Well, lo and behold, last night a second email went out, and this second email was supposed to answer questions about what that offer was about. I read it, because screenshots of it were provided to the media. And I will just tell you, it looks like it's written by a fifth grader. I wish I could say something more than that, but it's like an FAQ from a starter website. That's what it reads like. It makes no mention of pensions. It says to people, sure, you can go look for other employment during these 8 months. In fact, we really encourage you to make a quick transition from public service to the private sector. It literally doesn't answer any legitimate questions that you would want to have answered if you were being given a buyout package that was legitimate. So this also raises questions about who's actually in charge, who's writing this stuff, who is purporting to be in control of the employment of 2 million federal employees. Because I'm going to tell you something, doesn't look like there's any actual adults in charge. Doesn't look like there's anybody with, let's just say, career bureaucratic experience. So all of us should be mindful of the fact that it kind of looks like our government is in charge of someone who wasn't actually elected. And I'm just going to say one other thing. There's nothing that's going to drive Trump more crazy than the implication that he is not in charge of anything. So you should feel free to discuss this on social media. All right. We have to talk about something else that happened yesterday. So, we talked yesterday at length about that incredibly racist, misogynistic, ableist press conference that Trump held yesterday, where he claimed that the crash at Washington National Airport, over Washington National Airport, was the result of non-white people being in charge, disabled people being in charge, with no evidence, no proof, and honestly, no relevance, right? I wrote about this, by the way, this morning on Fridays in Trumpland. You guys can go check that out at newsletterwithecm.substack.com. It's linked in the box below. But one of the things that I will just let you all know here is that everything about that press conference was essentially two things. First, white men should be in charge of everything, regardless of whether or not they're qualified. And two, no one else is qualified to be in charge. And if anything goes wrong, it's their fault, not ours. One of the things that I've been thinking about overnight is the way in which we will never see Trump or anyone in his administration take responsibility when something goes wrong. And I'm just going to point out, he fired the head of the FAA on day one. He eliminated the Aviation Safety Board a couple of days later. And it wasn't until he walked into that press conference yesterday that we had an acting head of the FAA, almost 24 hours from when that plane crash occurred. And that's not to mention that he stopped hiring at the FAA on day one, that he's cut, any ability for anybody who's come in through a DEI type program to advance, right? There's so many things here that put responsibility for this at his feet. And I'm just going to say one other thing, because people have been nitpicking me about this on social media and nitpicking others about it on social media. I just want you to remember what happened during Benghazi, right? The Republicans spent literally months and months and months of investigations and taxpayer dollars and depositions and transcripts and testimony trying to claim that Hillary Clinton was personally responsible for the deaths of 4 Americans. We have 67 dead people in this plane crash at a moment where there was no head of the FAA, not even an acting head. The Aviation Safety Board had been dismantled. All hiring had been frozen. And essentially, Donald Trump and his people, through Elon Musk, had offered a buyout to every single FAA employee, including all air traffic controllers. I'm just going to tell you that I think the buck stops with them. And we all know that if the shoe was on the other foot, Jim Jordan, among many others, would be screaming about this, would be blaming those 67 deaths on a Democratic president. So I'm just going to tell you, the evidence is stacking up, and I don't think there's any reason why anybody should hesitate to point out the fact that in the 10 days preceding this accident, Trump did everything he could to gut the FAA. On that front, however, one of the things that I need to point out is that Trump is very, very scared that the talking point that I just elucidated for all of you is actually going to take flight. One of the reasons why they came in there barnstorming yesterday, blaming people of color, blaming people with disabilities with absolutely no evidence, is because Trump is engaging in DARVO. For those of you who don't know, we've talked about this a lot on the broadcast, but I do want people to understand this because you're going to see it a lot over the next 4 years. DARVO is a classic strategy of narcissistic abuse. It stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. We didn't do it. We had nothing to do with it. You know who did have something to do with it is all those Black people who were hired through DEI programs. And by the way, I'm the one who's been persecuted, or you are the people who have been persecuted, right? Not the people whose family members actually died, not the family members who are currently grieving, but someone else. When the reality is that the victims here of this particular course of conduct are the people who died and the families who are grieving. And that's honestly where Donald Trump's focus would have been if he had even a shred of humanity and dignity in his body. So please be prepared that we're going to see that strategy a lot. And that resulted in one of the more psychotically bizarre things that I have ever seen in the many, many years that I have been doing this last night. Trump signed an EO last night, live on Fox News, that blamed Biden and DEI programs for the plane crash. He signed an EO. Essentially, what he's trying to do is say, this is reality and I order you to believe me. Because he really doesn't want anyone pointing out that maybe the buck stops with him. So, I'm going to point out that you can't order a certain set of facts by executive order. You can't make things true that are not. You can't blame Black, brown, indigenous, LGBTQ plus disabled people for a plane crash. And I'm going to say, by the way, this has taken root because there's a whole slew of disinformation floating around the internet, including on TikTok right now, claiming that the pilot of the helicopter was a Black trans person. No evidence of that whatsoever, but that's the damage that this does, right? He really doesn't want anybody pointing the finger at him. He will deflect it anywhere else. And of course, because he is who he is, which is a virulent, rabid white supremacist, he will take every opportunity possible to blame people of color, other marginalized people for things that fall within the purview of his own responsibility. It's disgusting. And frankly, we've reached a point now where we need to be talking about reality. The reality of where we are is that he is not accepting responsibility for anything having to do with this, even though it all falls within his realm. And in any other circumstance, in any other dynamic, this would be a scandal big enough to threaten a presidency. I don't see any reason why this one should not be. So I want to encourage you all to kind of talk through the points about this on social media, with your friends, with people that you encounter, so that everybody understands that when you gut the FAA, you threaten the lives of anybody on an airplane. It's really that simple. So that's where I stand on that today, in case you couldn't tell, I'm a little pissed. Okay. Somebody asked a question on the Patreon feed. Reminder, you want to ask me questions about things and have me answer them on the air or in writing, you can join our Patreon community, which is amazing, at patreon.com/resistancelive. Somebody asked a question about what does it mean to be on center stage right now from a media perspective, and where is new media, and what, where is media generally right now, including new media, and where are Democrats in that regard? Okay, so there was a story yesterday, which kind of made me laugh, cry, to be honest about it, about people on the Hill asking Cory Booker for social media advice, and that he advised various senators to post on Instagram once a day. I'm paraphrasing, to post on Threads 3 to 5 times a day. And he gave them all basically his social media strategy. And I just have to point out, this is 2025. Like, any senator who's asking Cory Booker for social media advice is way beyond the times. Okay, like way behind the times. And I really think we've got to have a conversation right now about the fact that new media is where it's at. Just this morning, there was a study that came out that Gen Z in particular prefers to get their news from people like me. They prefer to get their news from legitimate YouTube commentators, from legitimate commentators on other social media platforms, and they prefer to access it through formats like this. They're not actually really invested in mainstream media, and they kind of would be fine to let mainstream media go. At least this is what this research is showing. And so one of the things that this means is that if the Dems are not on new media and making the most of all new media channels, that means like left-leaning podcasts, broadcasts like this one, interview opportunities for journalists and commentators, much like myself. If they are not maximizing on creators, content creators who are out there on the left, they're losing. And I have to say that this is a big problem, right? Like, I mean, I've talked this week about the fact that I'm disappointed in the response from Democrats generally right now, with a few minor exceptions. Like Chris Murphy's doing great, AOC is doing great, Elizabeth Warren. We do have people out there, Jamie Raskin, pushing back hard right now. But the vast majority of the people on the Hill in the Democratic Party are deeply slow right now to respond to this stuff. And we are obviously moving in a media environment where events are taking place like every minute. Like, so fast, I know if you're like me, it makes your head spin some days. There needs to be a rapid response team for the Democrats that is doing all of this stuff in real time. And the fact that there isn't is really concerning, because it means that the messaging isn't there and it's not reaching our base, and it's not actually counteracting so much of the propaganda that is being spewed right now nonstop 24/7 out of right-wing media channels. So this is something that is of serious concern, and not just for electoral cycles. It's of serious concern in terms of pushback against the administration, against the far right wing. Now, we did see one thing happen yesterday, which was better than nothing, I guess is the way to put it, which is that Russ Vought, who of course was Trump's nominee, is Trump's nominee to head the OMB, who everybody knows is one of like the founding fathers of Project 2025, right? And this guy is like creepy, like deeply creepy, far right wing. His committee vote to advance his nomination to the floor of the Senate was boycotted by every Democrat on the committee. Boycotted. They walked out of the room. It still got moved to the floor of the Senate by an 11-0 vote, because that committee, like every committee in the Senate right now, is controlled by Republicans. But it wasn't nothing. I wish it had actually been something that would have an impact. We've talked here about Indivisible's whole strategy about shutting down the Senate generally, about the need to use every possible venue, including Robert's Rules of Order, to stop the Senate from progressing on any of these nominations, let alone stop any Democrats on voting for his nominees, right? There's many, many more tools that could be used. That was something. But I'll tell you, the thing that worries me the most right now is that we need people in the party showing leadership. We need them showing how to message things to people who maybe aren't as in the loop as like you and me are, right? We need them out there still trying to fight back by telling people the truth, right? Let alone when you have Trump writing all these crazy EOs with these incredibly propagandist titles, like the anti-trans EOs have been all titled about protecting women, right? We need pushback. And, you know, I'm happy to be a part of that, as I know many other content creators on the left, new media people on the left are, but we also need it from the party. And so my question right now is like, where is the urgency? Why do we not have a rapid response team? Kamala HQ, you'll all remember during the 2024 cycle, had an incredibly skilled rapid response team. They pushed talking points out sometimes within a half an hour of an event. That's what we need, and we need it all the time. So I don't have all the answers, right? But I will tell you that I think that without something like that, and something like that quick, the messaging battle is going to continue to be lost. And that's going to become ever more dangerous, because as mainstream media capitulates to Donald Trump, talked so much about that on this broadcast in the last couple of weeks, the less we're going to have actual, factual, truthful information out there, let alone about things that really matter, like public health. So I don't know. If I could add one other talking point for you guys today, because I'm going to tell you again, call your senators, tell them to vote down Kash Patel. Call your senators, tell them to vote down Tulsi Gabbard. Call your senators, tell them to vote down RFK Jr. Tell them also that you want to know why they're not on social media 24/7 talking about this stuff. Why is there no rapid response team? Okay. I was asked today by someone on the Patreon feed to give everybody a win. So I don't exactly have a win, but I have some good news, which I guess is kind of a win. Many of you know that back in the day, heading into the 2022 senatorial cycle, I was doing a lot of work with Malcolm Kenyatta. And I love Malcolm. He is a very dear friend. And I will always be in his corner, like for as long as I live. He's just a wonderful, marvelous human being. He's exactly the kind of leader that Democrats should be looking to when we look to the future. He announced yesterday that he is running for vice chair of the DNC. And if you haven't seen the announcement, I really encourage you to go find it at Malcolm Kenyatta on every major social media platform. He's ready for exactly the kind of thing that I was just describing in terms of messaging, in terms of pushing back, in terms of fighting the good fight. To me, my ideal ticket, because I've been asked about this week, is I really want to see Ben Wickler at the top of the DNC, and I want to see Malcolm as vice chair. I think it would make a huge difference to have millennial leadership, diverse leadership, progressive, pro-labor, pro-LGBTQ rights, pro-abortion rights, pro-immigrant leadership at the top of the DNC. They're ready. Both of those guys are incredibly social media savvy. They're incredibly good at what they do. They have compelling public presences and they represent America. So the election is like, I think it's tomorrow. It's quick. But my hope is that the DNC comes out here with like the right leadership on top. It might be Monday, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But it's like always the beginning of February. So I really want to encourage you all to amplify Malcolm today, please. He's such a good guy. I mean, I can't imagine what a different party we would have with someone like him or someone like Ben Wickler. And for that matter, like, you know, people like AOC and Jasmine Crockett and Maxwell Frost and other younger folks in charge who really are savvy to the moment. So please go amplify Malcolm's run for vice chair. And let's hope that this all turns out well. All right. We desperately need better leadership at the top of the party right now. Okay. That's it for today. Quick reminder to everybody who's watching here. You have a very short window of time to get in on the next cohort of the Dual Power Accelerator. Registration closes Tuesday. Class starts Wednesday. All right. So if you want to join us, and as always, I'm going to drop a link up here up top when we're done. You got to get in right now. The link to join is below in the show notes. I'm also going to put it in the comments, and it's right here below me, GaiaLeadershipProject.com/dual-power accelerator. You want in on this, like 100%. Incredible community of people, all doing community organizing work. Everybody from our first cohort, all several hundred of them, will be hanging around for your ride. So please consider joining us if you have not yet done this. It is an incredible program. I'm really proud of it. Incredibly proud of the community. 10 weeks of training, 2 calls a week with yours truly. Really remarkable place to hang out. And also it'll make you feel better because you'll be in community with incredible people who really care. So please consider getting in on that. And then reminder here, if you like what I do, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Drop me a comment if you're watching on the replay so that you let the algorithm know that you dig what we do here. And don't forget that you can support this broadcast by either clicking the $sign below or join, because on some platforms, that's what it looks like. Or you can join us at patreon.com/resistancelive. All of your dollars going to go to support this work and to keep me and my children alive and to pay my team, who are an incredible group of single mothers. So, well, one of them just got remarried, but, you know, close. We're all raising young children. So please consider supporting this broadcast if it is meaningful to you in whatever way that you can. And don't forget, you can share this broadcast with others if they could use this support. All right, my friends. Patreon members, we will have a progressive coffee hour this weekend. I think it's going to be on Sunday. So stay tuned for that. And everybody else, I will see you on Monday. Please enjoy your weekend. Try to relax. Get out into nature. Hang with your people. Get face-to-face with people who you love and who get it. All right. That's what we all really need right now. All right. I'll see you all here very soon. Thanks so much for watching and for supporting what I do. Bye.